Hey there, it's the real Jason Duncan. I've got a special announcement for you really quick. I am hosting the Exit Lifestyle Conference in Nashville, Tennessee, February 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 2022. You don't want to miss it. Go to theexitlifestyle.com to learn more.
So we do have clients that are traditionally published who are using us for marketing. Some of our clients get picked up, so we work with them to get the book done and then they get picked up. But the majority of our clients are self-published, and part of that's my own passion for this. Your intellectual property is an asset. And when you put it into a book form, you owning it allows you to leverage that into so many more things than if a publisher owns it. You can determine foreign rights. You have opportunities for film and television, which is more common than people think. I mean, a lot of times it gets optioned and never gets produced, but you still get paid and you still own the underlying body of work. You can turn it into courses and talks. And, there's a lot of things you can do with the asset that is your book, that is your intellectual property, if you own it. So I'm pretty passionate, besides the fact that you make way more money typically as a self-published author if you sell books than if you ever get a book deal. But so my preference is that you self-publish because I think it's better, but it's not better for everyone. For some people, traditional can make sense.
In today's ultra-competitive business world, being a successful entrepreneur or business owner can be very challenging. Fortunately, contemporary times have blessed us with resources for tackling those challenges and getting us to success more quickly than we could have imagined. Welcome to The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan, a podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs grow incredible companies. This podcast looks at the 5 keys to unlocking success as an entrepreneur. A successful educator turned entrepreneur, Jason's mission is to use his gifts of teaching and leadership to help others get the results they want out of life. Join Jason every week and learn the keys to grow a truly successful business.
Welcome back to The Root of All Success. I am the real Jason Duncan, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you so very much for taking time out of your schedule today to listen to this show. And I've got a guest on today. Her name is Julie Broad. She is Canadian. Now she lives in the US, and she has been very successful in the real estate market in Canada. And then when she moved here to the US, she decided to start a new company based on her success as a #1 best-selling author on Amazon. So she took that #1 best-selling author, what she had been able to do in self-publishing a book after getting turned down by traditional book publishers, and turned it into a phenomenal company called Book Launchers, where she's helping over 135 authors right now. She has a team of I think 50 people. She's going to tell a little bit more about them on the show. She's helped write and self-publish over 300 books. And she herself has written 3 books. The #1 bestseller she wrote was called More Than Cash Flow. She wrote another book called The New Brand You, which we talk a little bit about on the show, and it's kind of an interesting title and why she wrote it. And then her most recent book is Self-Publish and Succeed. So she's written 3 books. She's helped 300 other books get written, and she's going to share her story today about how she achieved success, not only as an author, but an entrepreneur who's helping other authors do what they do. Now, you're going to hear in my questions today a very personal slant, because I'm an aspiring author. I want to write a book. There's been a book bubbling up in me for a long time, and I just don't know how to go about doing it. So Julie is going to endure my questions today on how I can do that. So before we get into that, I want to thank you again for listening to the show. Thank you for subscribing. We're syndicated by the C-Suite Radio Network, also on C-Suite TV. So we're on all podcast players. We're on YouTube. We're on C-Suite TV. So thank you to C-Suite for doing that. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. You have no idea how much just having those subscriptions and 5-star reviews mean to a show like this. We are growing, and we are moving up in the rankings as a show. The Root of All Success is now being recognized as one of the fastest growing entrepreneur shows out there on the market. And we want to continue to provide great value and bring on amazing guests. So thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for leaving great reviews. And without any further ado, let me introduce you to Julie Broad. Well, Julie Broad, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, we got introduced through an organization that said, "Hey, I think there's a good synergy between what you're doing and what I talk about on the show." And what the great part about hosting a show like The Root of All Success is I get to interview and talk to people that it is not likely that my normal life would come across. And they end up being fantastic conversations. I've made good friendships with people that I've met on the show, and I expect to be able to do that with you. So thank you for being here today. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur. And you're coming to us today from Las Vegas, but via Canada. So you actually moved from Canada to the US. Tell me a little bit about how that move happened and why the US.
Yeah, so it was an adventure, as is everything. The shortish version is that we were real estate investors, my husband and I, and had a real estate training and education company. But it was getting a little repetitive, a little boring for my husband, and he started to take acting classes and get into acting, and decided to ultimately pursue a career as an actor. And me, being the kind of person who doesn't like to do things partially, I was like, well, if you're going to be an actor, we better go to LA. And so
there you go.
Started to figure out how we could get into the country, and it became a visa application process where we looked at buying a business to move, and I ultimately didn't want to buy somebody else's problems. I wanted to create my own. So I started, I dreamed up a company and started a company, and moved to the US to launch that company and support my husband.
So your husband is Christian Bale, is that right?
Yeah, wouldn't that be great? Don't tell him I said that, but no.
So how's that going for him? Just, I know that has nothing to do with what we talk about the show, but I don't talk to people who have moved here to get into acting very much. So how's that going?
Yeah, I mean, it was going okay, but the pandemic hit and wreaked havoc with everything, which is why we've now moved from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. The good news is it moved all the auditions to self-tape, which is really great, because in LA, he was spending an hour to an hour and a half each way in traffic to go into a room for 5 minutes for a 5-minute audition. So it's really nice to be able to self-tape at home. And so we didn't have to be in LA for that, and we're 4 hours away. So when he does book something, it's not that arduous to get there. So, but it's tough. It's a really tough industry. You're going to be in it probably for 10 years before you're hitting something that's really notable. Yeah, it's a hard one to support someone in, because it's hard to watch. It's epic, constant rejection. Like, that is the life of an actor, even a successful one. It's pretty consistent rejection before you get somebody that says, yeah, I'll put you on my show, or you can be in my movie.
Sounds exactly like sales to me. Constant rejection, and you win one, and it's great.
Really, it is. And you kind of have to have the same mentality that a salesperson does. And it's like, okay, one no, I'm one no closer to getting a yes. Really is kind of how you have to look at it, is like, oh, that was audition 10. So I got to do another 10 before I'm going to get booked on something.
So this show is about entrepreneurial success, and we talk about how you became successful. So let's start with, Julie, how you got started as an entrepreneur to begin with.
Yeah, it's a fun, I love that question, because it's kind of like, I think I was always meant to be an entrepreneur, but I went to business school and they teach you how to be a corporate employee, not an entrepreneur. So I took a slight detour, but I started investing in real estate in 2001. And that was really, to me, when you buy a property, you become a business owner. So you are really entrepreneurial if you invest in property. And so that was really the start, was buying my first. I actually bought 2 properties in 2001 and liked it. And so got into it and kept buying property to the point where in 2008, I quit my full-time job, which anybody who knows real estate knows that I had terrible timing to leave a job to go full-time into real estate.
Oops.
But yeah, I learned a lot, and actually it was a great time to be buying. So that's really, it was hard to find capital, which, I needed to raise capital to buy the properties. It was hard to find capital, but the deals we did then in 2008, 2009, 2010 were phenomenal deals. It just took a while, holding on to them and surviving the rough patches. But that's really, where the entrepreneurial thing started for me, was real estate.
So you started buying real estate in 2001. So you did that kind of on the side while you're working your corporate gig in the business world. And then in 2008, you made the decision to start a real estate company. What was your focus of that company? Was it commercial, residential? Was it multifamily? What were you doing with real estate?
Yeah, it was all houses. At the time, we moved into commercial later, but it was all houses, buying, renting them out, sometimes adding suites so that there was second, two sources of income from them. But yeah, it was all rental properties.
So at the height of your real estate empire, how many single family rentals did you guys manage and own?
Yeah, I never actually counted, but it was in the 30s. I'd say it was almost probably close to 40. If I was to pick a number, I'd say 36, but I was never one for counting them, which is funny. It was a big thing in the real estate industry is how many doors do you own? But I hated that question. So I purposely never knew the answer.
Yeah, well, you got to build the hedges around your mind so that you don't get embroiled in things that don't matter to you. So did you, do you still maintain those properties, or did you sell those when you moved to the US?
We have some. The fun thing about moving that we kind of knew but didn't realize was that the minute we left Canada, they have this lovely thing called deemed disposition. So any property that you own, they deem it as sold and they charge you capital gains tax on that. So we had to sell properties to pay the capital gains tax on the properties that we still own.
So let me get this straight. So Canada as a country, as a country, says if you move out of the country, any real estate you owned, you have to pay capital gains taxes over the basis of the purchase price, original purchase price, when you move.
Exactly. And it's if you hold it in a corporation, so we have properties in corporations, they aren't subject to the same thing, but anything that was in our personal name, which was a decent amount, because when you're buying property, banks don't finance companies, they finance people. And so a lot of the deals we did, to get financing in the first place were in a personal name. So yeah, so the country of Canada kindly is holding a lot of our tax money. And no interest. They don't pay you interest on this. So yeah, we sold some of our portfolio to really launch the business and cover our costs while we got down here. And then we had to sell some properties to pay the government.
So when you moved to the US, you moved to LA
Yep.
because your husband wants to be an actor, and that obviously makes sense. Although I hear that's changing, especially, and it being accelerated because of the pandemic and the nuttiness that's going on in California. I don't want to assume why you moved out of LA to Las Vegas, but I can only assume that you, like so many other people, are leaving California because of all the restrictions and what's going on, the high taxes. But I hear that it's moving out of LA. Like a lot of the acting, Georgia's becoming a hot spot for a lot of film industry. Yeah. Nashville, not so much, although, which is where I am, but I know that there are a few films that are being filmed here locally. It's like I live in the town of Gallatin, which is just north of Nashville, and we're right on the border of a unincorporated area called Cottontown, Tennessee. And they're one of the guys that is a waiter at a club that I'm a member of in Nashville is shooting a film in Cottontown, of all places. Cool. This tiny little town in northern Middle Tennessee. They're shooting I think it's a horror film, something about the legend of such and such or whatever. But I think it's changing. So you moved to LA to get into acting, or for your husband to get into acting, and you made a conscious decision. I'm going to start another business. And did you consciously decide not to do real estate in the US, or tell me why you didn't do real estate in the US, or maybe you are and I just don't know that part of your story.
Yeah, no, I did consciously choose not to do real estate. I was tired of it, 2001, and I never intended. So that's the fun part of this, is I never intended real estate to be my full-time thing. I got into it, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I was 20, I think, and I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was like, I got to get my money working for me. And so I had money saved to go to school because I was going to do an MBA. And I just took that money and I put it towards my first property. And then I did student loans for school, because I was like, well, when I graduate, at least I'll have a property that's been paying down the mortgage. So that was really where that started. It was never intended to be plan A. It was always plan B, like that retirement, that side gig. And then in 2008, just things happened in my job, and I was done. I wanted freedom. I wanted to control. I wanted to try things that the president of the company I worked for wouldn't try things. The funny part about that is he told me I wanted him to start a blog, because he was a real estate data company. And he said, I feel like a blog. Like, we're not going to start a blog. It's like, okay. Okay. Exactly. And I just thought, I'm trapped here, so I need to get out. Timing didn't matter at the time. So, and real estate was there. Is kind of my point. Is I'd been doing real estate for 7 years at that point. It was there. So when I quit, it was something to support me, but it was never my passion. It was always supposed to be the side gig, the secondary income source.
When did you guys move to the US?
2000 and we haven't been here quite 5 years because I'm on a 5-year visa and it's up for renewal soon.
Okay. So within the last 5 years, you moved here. And so you made a conscious decision not to stay in real estate and you wanted to do something different and you got into book publishing, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, so what that seems to be, that's odd to me, if you don't mind me being so blunt, to go from be very successful and owning 30 plus doors in real estate, moving to the US to pursue an acting dream with your husband. And hey, I'm just going to start a book publishing company. What in the world? Help me understand how that came to be.
Yeah. I mean, as a little girl, I thought I would be a writer and I wrote short stories. I was published, repeatedly by the age of 9. So I always thought I would be a writer, but somebody told me writers don't make money. And even as a little girl, I really liked money. I wanted to make money. And then I had an English teacher who made me feel like I couldn't string a proper sentence together. So the combination took me to business school. I did an undergrad in business and an MBA in real estate and finance. So that's kind of, I thought that. And then real estate actually took me back to writing because in all of these adventures, I was a student and I still wanted to buy property. So we got into no money down deals and buying other people's problems. And I had great stories. And so I started to write a newsletter just because friends and family love to hear about all the things that had gone wrong in real estate. And I started to write this newsletter and it just kind of started to evolve into a platform. I started speaking all across Canada. I was writing articles for magazines and newsletters. I had a YouTube channel. And so I started to kind of really get into writing to the point where a publisher actually approached me and was like, hey, it looks like you're doing some interesting things. And I said, oh, I've got a book idea. And the publisher said, oh, that book's been done already, but they gave me a different idea and we worked together to build a proposal. Ultimately, though, they said, the marketing department doesn't think you have a strong enough platform to sell books. So they shut me down and I ended up first I ended up crying, truthfully, because again, that kind of reignited the little girl, like the little girl that thought she'd be a writer. When the publisher was talking to me, the dream came alive again. But after I recovered, I decided to self-publish, and it led to my first book. So there's more to the story, but I'll just hang tight for a sec.
Well, so that's really interesting, Julie. So you moved to the US. You've got this background of wanting to be a writer, and your English teacher, shame on her or him, squashed your dreams and said you couldn't put 2 sentences together. But it never really went away. So you had this desire. You start writing a newsletter to tell people about your adventures. You get a YouTube channel. You get invited to speak. Now you're living in the US, right? And
this was still in Canada.
So all that was in Canada. But so did you start Book Launchers in Canada, or did you start it here?
No, I started it in the US. And so the first book was I published my first book in 2013. So we didn't move down here till 2017. And the first book really opened my eyes to the world of self-publishing and the power of actually self-publishing, because up until I was kind of forced into it, I really thought you had to have a publishing deal to be legit. And then self-publishing and doing better. My book went to #1 on Amazon. So ahead of Dan Brown, ahead of Game of Thrones as a print book, #1 in print books. And to do that well as a self-published, nonfiction real estate book was pretty incredible. And had I got that publishing deal, I would have made about 20% of what I made from selling that book. But also the rights, like this was my intellectual property. I later licensed off this, so much stuff that came out of that book. I licensed it off to people. I couldn't have done that if Wiley had given me the book deal. And so I started to really see the power of self-publishing and writing a book. And, the capital that came in the door after the book came out, people called us up and were like, I got $250,000. I read your book. Can I invest it with you? Like random, to the point where you're like, what?
That's awesome. So your book, you publish your first book, you self-publish your first book after you're turned down by the publisher. and it was called More Than Cash Flow. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
And you published that in 2013 before you moved to the US, 4 years before you moved to the US. You published that, and that kind of catapults your platform. Because wasn't that what you said, that they said, hey, you don't have the platform to publish this book, but then you self-publish the book and it gives you the platform, because now people are calling you, looking at you as an expert and saying, I'll give you money. Take my money, show me where to invest it. And you now have a platform to do great things. So questions. In the self-publishing of the book, generally speaking, how long did it take you to write and then publish that book? Like turnaround time, how long did that take?
Yeah, I mean, it took me about 18 months, but I was also researching what to do, right? Because I went into this kind of going, well, if you're not going to publish me, I'm going to do it better than if you had published me. And so I researched, and there wasn't a lot on self-publishing, but I read everything I could on book marketing, writing books, and everything I could find, because I was going to do this well. I was going to make it so nobody actually looked at it like a self-published book. That was really my goal. So it took about 18 months, but it was a lot of intense work. Thankfully, our other businesses were operating pretty smoothly, so I could dedicate a lot of time and energy to that.
So it took you about 18 months, but of course, the first time you do anything takes longer than the next time you do that thing. And that's why what I tell, my main message is exit without exiting. So I coach my clients on how to exit their businesses without selling them. And they say, well, how long did it take you, Jason? And I say, oddly enough, about 18 months. But now that I've done it, know how to do it, and I'm helping other people do it, you can accelerate that time significantly. So in writing your first book and self-publishing your first book, you were able to do that in 18 months, but now you can do it much quicker, because that's not the only book you wrote, because More Than Cash Flow top was Amazon #1, but you wrote at least a couple other books. You wrote The New Brand You, and then the latest book, Self-Publish and Succeed. Yep. Tell me about The New Brand You. I think I had to say that really slowly so that I got that right. What's The New Brand You about?
Yeah, that one I think was really a book I wrote so that I had lessons to teach authors on what not to do, including the title. So it's funny that you have to say it slowly, because the title, as much as I workshopped it and really tried to find a great title, I did a lot of interviews for that book. And I'd say 80% of the people called it The Brand New You. They'd be looking right at it and they'd still call it The Brand New You. So I now know how to coach our clients on titles because of that, because of the mistake. Like it just, for whatever reason, the brain does not process what that title is. And it's very consistent. So thank you for making the extra effort to get it right. But most people, when they're going on the fly, they call it The Brand New You, which unfortunately there's another book out there called that. And it does well. So when somebody finds it, I've just sold Dory Clark's book. But anyway, so that book, though, is really from More Than Cash Flow, from all of the capital that we raised. My husband and I did the real estate investing business together. And so the capital that we raised was a result of not cold calling, but building a brand that people wanted to work with. And it really was like, it's about being a magnet versus having to cold call and hustle and kind of do those things. It's that conscious choice of what are you putting out there in the world, and what is that going to attract? That's what The New Brand You is. And I should have wrote it really specific for real estate, but I was already kind of looking at branching out. So I made it a little more general, which again is something that I coach people on now, because it was harder to sell. If it had been real estate, I could have sold thousands and thousands of copies, because everybody wanted to understand how to raise capital, how to attract the best people to their teams, the best tenants. But I tried to use it to pivot, and it didn't fly.
Well, so that led you to, is your latest book your third book, or is it just, are there others in between that we haven't talked about yet?
No, it's the Self-Publish and Succeed was in between, or it was the third book, I should say. In between, I had a child and launched a business, so I was busy.
A little bit.
Just a couple things going on.
So you went from the experience of real estate, writing about your experience in real estate and More Than Cash Flow. Then you succeed at that to a place where you're like, hey, this writing a book thing actually works. It gets me the platform and the capital I need to continue my business. Second book you write, The New Brand You, kind of focuses a little bit on real estate, kind of on other things, continues to build your brand. But then you decide, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to start book launchers. How did that come about? We're going to take a break from our show right now to bring you our sponsors.
Want to be more active this summer? Sierra helps you save on everything from swimsuits to stand-up paddleboards, tennis rackets to fishing tackle. And if that doesn't float your boat, we also have pool floats. Sierra, let's get moving to your local store, like now. Go!
All right, thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I mean, largely it was because we were looking at business opportunities for the E2 investor visa to move to the US. But I'd been thinking about this for a while. And so I had a real estate training and education company in Canada. And I had coached people and I'd built courses and done that thing. And I knew I didn't want to do a training and education company. I really, having gone through the publishing process, I knew people needed service. People like me that were busy running businesses, they're subject matter experts, they're, doctors that have patients, all those kind of things. There's no time to figure out, okay, I got to hire this person. I got to hire, now I need a content editor. Okay, now I need a copy editor. Okay, now I need a cover designer. Hiring all of those people and even knowing what to look for and knowing which people you need in which order, that's intensely time consuming. And people don't need to be coached on that. They need just somebody handing them, hey, all of this is done for you. You bring the content and we're going to take care of the rest. So I knew that was a need. I knew that's what I wanted. And so I just kept coming back to this kind of gnawing idea and interest and passion to writing and knowing how powerful it is to be an author, wanting to help people do that. And also the impact that authors have is pretty extraordinary. So it's kind of, in a way, a little bit selfish, but I get to help people help others. And so to me, that impact is really phenomenal. And it just kept getting me excited to the point where it drew me to create this business. I had done enough in it that I saw the gaps, I saw the opportunities, and I got really excited about it. So it was, but I had to hire people because I'm not a publishing expert. I definitely am a real estate expert, but I wasn't a publishing expert. So I had to hire great people who were.
So what services specifically does Book Launchers provide?
Yeah, so what we do that's really different is that we're focused on marketing. And so we have a team of people who will market the book with you at the end. And so right from the very beginning, we pair you with a story expert to help you craft an interesting book so that it's marketable at the end. Because a lot of people who self-publish, they write the book and then they figure out how to market. And it really, there's so many things that need to be layered in order to achieve that marketing success. So we're layering that in early. So we have story experts, we have writers, we also have writing coaches. So depending on if you want somebody to assist you with the writing or if you want to just be coached. So we have writers, writing coaches. We have, of course, the three different kinds of editing that you need. We have developmental editors, copy editors, proofreaders, designers, and then we have researchers. The researchers are researching for marketing, so we can find your influencers, but they're also researching your keywords, your categories, your pricing, your competitors. They're researching, they do fact checking. A lot of people put things down and they state it like it's a fact. So we have fact checkers to help make sure your butt is covered before the book goes out. So there's lots of people, lots of pieces that all come under one roof. And we do it all because I don't think you can separate to succeed. I don't think you can separate marketing from the other pieces. It has to all be there in order for your book to be set up for success.
Yeah, well, that sounds pretty comprehensive. I mean, based on the fact that, I was approached several years ago when one of my companies ended up on the Inc. 5000 list about publishing a book. I think they just kind of reach out to the CEOs of those companies. Hey, have you ever thought about writing a book? And at the time I thought about it maybe, but it wasn't a real thought. So I didn't pursue it. And then later when I exited my company and started a coaching and consulting company, among other things, thought, hey, I'm ready to do this now. So then I started reaching out and what I found is that there are companies that do pieces of what you just talked about, but they don't do all of it. Sounds like so Book Launchers is fairly comprehensive. Now, are you still encouraging people to self-publish, or are you actually working with publishers now to get people published in traditional means?
I mean, we work with some traditional authors, primarily on the marketing side, because one of the misconceptions is that if you get a traditional deal, they do the marketing for you. If you think back to my original story, I was turned down because I wasn't going to sell enough books. So traditional publishers expect you to do the marketing. So we do have clients that are traditionally published who are using us for marketing. Some of our clients get picked up, so we work with them to get the book done and then they get picked up. But the majority of our clients are self-published. And part of that's my own passion for this. Your intellectual property is an asset. And when you put it into a book form, you owning it allows you to leverage that into so many more things than if a publisher owns it. You can determine foreign rights. You have opportunities for film and television, which is more common than people think. I mean, a lot of times it gets optioned and never gets produced, but you still get paid and you still own the underlying body of work. You can turn it into courses and talks. And, there's a lot of things you can do with the asset that is your book, that is your intellectual property, if you own it. So I'm pretty passionate, besides the fact that you make way more money typically as a self-published author if you sell books than if you ever get a book deal. But so my preference is that you self-publish because I think it's better, but it's not better for everyone. For some people, traditional can make sense.
Yeah, well, I had a question for you about all of that. I think one of the curiosities that I have, because of what I've been told in book publishing world and by coaches and mentors and consultants and colleagues, is that if you have a book idea and you bring it to a publisher or to someone like you that's doing a self-publishing thing, but you help orchestrate and put the book together, the coming with an idea is always better. At least this is what I've been told. I'm fact checking it for you with you, but is always a better thing to do than coming with, hey, I've already written the book. What can you do to help me out? Which, is that true, that coming with an idea is better than coming with a finished, not manuscript, but whatever, first draft?
Typically, yes. I mean, with a publisher, you probably don't want to write the book because they're going to direct you as to the angle they want to pursue. But you would create a proposal. So having an idea is important because your proposal needs to be built around the marketability and the need in the marketplace and the audience for this idea. With us, you can bring us a first draft. We rarely will work with somebody who's already gone through anything more than a first draft because of this need to make sure. The same reason the traditional publisher doesn't want it is we want to make sure we get a marketing hook in there. We want to make sure your audience is really clear. And like I said, with my second book, the mistake I made was trying to reach too big of an audience with that book. It wasn't specific enough. And had I said, this is branding for real estate investors, that book would have sold incredibly well because I was specific. And a lot of people are afraid to be specific, but it sells books. And so when you're early in the writing, you can add that in. When your book is done, it can be emotionally exhausting to think about going back and fixing it.
What are your opinions and thoughts on ebooks? That seems to be a very popular thing that a lot of people are putting out there for download, even dropping them on Amazon or on Kindle as an ebook. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, it's different goals, different intentions. So I think ebooks we encourage every one of our authors to have a reader magnet, which is a short ebook or checklist or something. But, as far as if you want to be an author and you want to use it to get speaking gigs, adding a zero to your consulting fees, getting media attention, an ebook isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about, it doesn't have to be a huge book, but we do want to make sure it's in print. And nonfiction books, 75% of them are selling in print. So if you only put out an ebook version of your book, you've diminished the value of it, but you've also diminished the utility and the reach, because there's a huge chunk of the population, especially with nonfiction, that wants to hold it in their hands. And as a marketing tool, you want people to hold it in their hands because they're not going to throw it out. They'll pass it off to somebody. At worst, they're going to donate it. So it's probably going to get read again.
Very interesting. I told you before we started recording that because I have an interest in writing a book and publishing a book, that I would ask a lot more tactical questions because of my just selfish personal interest in this. But I think that as I interview a lot of people on this show that are successful entrepreneurs in various different things, that sometimes when I'm talking to that particular person I'm interviewing with doesn't directly intersect with the entrepreneurs who listen to the show. But I would suspect that there are lots of people listening to this show right now who are like me and have had the idea, hey, I want to do a book at some point. I want to do this. And so listening to The Root of All Success today with Julie Broad, they're hearing you not only tell the story about your success in writing a book, but your success and launching a company to help other people do the same thing, because you're no slouch. I mean, you've been published. I've got in my notes here, you've been published and featured in media, including Forbes, Entrepreneur.com, Yahoo Business, CTV, the Vancouver Sun, Medium.com. So this is not just some some lady who followed her husband into his dream and then decided, well, I'll just do something to keep myself busy. You're actually legit and you've done this and you know what you're doing. So let me ask you about book launchers in general. So how many authors or projects do you work on at any one time? And is there anything specific about that you want versus don't want?
Yeah, I mean, right now we have 135 authors that we're working with. We've worked on over 300 books now in our 4 years of existence. So we've grown quite quickly, which has been fun and challenging and quite an exciting ride to have hired as many people as we've hired and work with as many people on our team as we have, because that's the thing with this business, is that it's very labor intensive. Like, to do a book really well, we have about 12 different experts that are working on your book throughout the process in order to create a book that's as good or better than a traditionally published book. There's so much more that goes into it to do it really, really well. And so that's the challenging part of this job, or this company, is hiring, is finding a phenomenal talent and then training it to our standard too. Because in book descriptions in particular, we've really struggled to find great copywriters who can write it to our standard. People who have 20 years in the business, we're going, that is like, nobody's going to buy that book. You've been writing book descriptions for Seth Godin for too long, because Seth Godin's books sell themselves, and we have to sell the book with your description. So it's challenging, because when you grow, you constantly need more talent. And so that's been an interesting journey for me, because it was new in this business, having to hire and grow with so many people.
How many, so you've got 135 authors that you're working with currently. You've done over 300 books. How many employees or people on your team do you have?
Yeah, there's 17 full-time, and then we have 47 contractors right now.
That's a lot. And you've done this since you launched when you moved here in 2017. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So in five or so years, 4 or 5 years, you've turned this into a pretty big enterprise on book launchers. And there are, I'm sure you're not the only person doing this. You've got competition. So yep. You've succeeded a lot. So congratulations to you. How would you define the word success?
Yeah, to me, it's freedom and impact. It's definitely not Ferraris and yachts. I've never, even in real estate, that was a big thing. It was never my thing. For me, it's kind of creating your own day and helping people and leaving the world a better place. As cheesy as that kind of sounds, but helping other people in their journey in some way. So that's what success is to me.
Well, with that as a definition, Julie, do you consider yourself to be a successful person?
I think I've had success, and I don't like to define myself as successful or failure. It makes me uncomfortable, because as soon as you tell yourself you're successful, the counter to that is that you have to, in those low moments, call yourself a failure, right? At least it feels that way. So I prefer to say that I've had success, and I've definitely continue, and I plan to have a lot more success. But me as a person, I'm a work in progress.
Well, I appreciate the honesty, and it's interesting. I asked the question, 99% of the guests who come on the show ask the question, and about 50% answer some version of what you just said, and 50% are, yeah, absolutely 100%. But I think both of them come from a similar perspective. I think given enough time and just a little conversation, we're all answering the question about the same ways. Yeah, I'm a successful person based on these parameters, but I'm not settled there. There's more to it than that. And I've got more to go and more to grow. I love your definition of impact and freedom. And impact is that word that we use when we talk about what we want to accomplish in life. But freedom, I think, is the thing that we want more than anything else. We want, as an entrepreneur, one of the reasons we start companies is to get freedom. But unfortunately, a lot of entrepreneurs ended up being shackled to their business. It sounds like that you've gotten what you wanted, and that is you've gotten to make impact on these 300 authors and the different books that you're out there doing that. So congratulations. I applaud you for being able to accomplish that. I know that makes you feel good. And I know your husband's got to be proud too. And I think it's a great success story for you. Great North American success story, because Canada and the US are both involved, and hopefully you get to stay here a little bit longer. When your visa gets renewed, you can stay a little longer, keep book launchers going. So the 5 keys of success is why I actually started this podcast to begin with. And so this relates directly to your expertise as an author and a book publisher, or helper. I don't know. Do you call book launchers a book publisher? What do you refer to it as?
Professional self-publishing services. You're the publisher. You're the publisher.
All right. So as a book writer, author, helper, when I sat down to start this show, I started at The Root of All Success as a way to help me write a book that I had back in the back of my mind, which was these 5 keys of success, or to success, that I had learned by doing casual interviews with very successful entrepreneurs for the last 6-8 years. I've been just meeting with entrepreneurs. How did you do what you did? What are the keys? And I discovered through those interviews, those casual interviews, these 5 things. And so when I hired a coach last year to help me figure out what do I do to get all these ideas in my head out into content that would help make an impact and make money, right? I mean, that's why we do this. Yeah. And the idea came up, well, I could do the podcast focused on these 5 keys and use the interviews that I do with the guests on the show to help fill the content in the book about, hey, this is personal information from someone who experienced these keys, and here's what he or she said about it. So I want to ask you about these 5 keys. I want to ask you and see how they intersect with your experience as an entrepreneur, and how you're helping these other authors experience success, and see how they work out. So is that fair? Can we do that?
Yeah, let's do it.
So the first key that I discovered that was pretty evident in my interviews with people was, in order to be successful as an entrepreneur, you had to have passion. But most people think that means emotional passion. In other words, you love it and it's joy, it gives you joy and energy. And while I do believe that is a contributing factor to success, the real key of passion is intellectual passion. It's the side of passion, actually, where we get the etymology of the word passion means willing to endure. And I think that you, me, every author you've worked with, every successful person that you and I know in the entrepreneurial world, use the key of willingness to endure, which we call passion, to help unlock their success. What do you think about that?
I've never heard that definition before, and I love it, because it is something that I think success is created from. When we were early in our real estate days, we had done P90X, and Tony Horton always said, keep pressing play. And that was kind of our mantra, was like, you just got to keep pressing play, just keep pressing play. And it's that willingness to just keep pressing play that creates success, and that drive to do it. So I think I love that definition, because I think it is people who finish their book, they were willing to endure the whole emotional process, the editing process, all the pieces. So yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Well, I'm glad you like it. And as a wordsmith yourself, I think that you would appreciate that more than most, because if you look at the etymology of that word passion, it actually does mean willing to endure or even suffer, and not suffer in a negative sense, like you're sadistic and you just like bad things happening to you, but willing to endure for a greater cause. And it goes back to, and I use this example almost every time I talk about it, the Passion of the Christ, which we talked about that last week of his life on earth before he was crucified. We refer to it as the Passion of the Christ. And I always was confused. Well, it doesn't sound very joyful. It doesn't sound like that's exciting and wonderful. But once you understand that word passion didn't mean happiness, it meant willingness to endure for a cause. Okay, now that makes sense. And it also makes sense for entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs who listen to the show who want to be successful, if you're not willing to endure for whatever it is you're thinking about doing, you can give it up. You're not going to succeed. You liking the thing will help, but that also will not be your key to success. Just because you like it doesn't mean you're going to succeed at it. Many people have failed because they pursued a quote, a passion that they weren't willing to endure for. They just liked it a lot. So I'm glad you like the idea. The second key, Julie, that I talk about and I discovered in my interviews was being in the right place at the right time. And you'll notice that these 5 keys are all starting with P. So passion and place. So place, being in the right place, right time. So for you and for anybody, how did being at the right place, right time play into your success?
Yeah, I think it's huge. Thinking about my first book going to number 1 on Amazon, you notice that I never promised that in saying like, well, now we're going to help authors go to number 1. My book went to number 1 because it was 2013 and a lot of people hadn't self-published yet. The story behind how I self-published was, why I was self-publishing was compelling to people. And I had a bunch of, people who were realtors, mortgage brokers, they ran investment clubs, and they got behind my story as much as they got behind the book, and they promoted it. And so it wasn't my platform. Wiley was right. I didn't have a strong enough platform to sell thousands and thousands of books in a week. But it was my colleagues that I had built relationships with. And to this day, people look and they're like, well, can't these same people promote the book? I'm like, yes, but at that time, my book was the first one talking about the risks of real estate and, some of these gory stories. And I was early to the self-publishing where, everybody wasn't asking you to promote a book at that time. So the timing of that is what allowed it to go to number 1. Plus, nobody had released a Harry Potter book that week, because if you were competing with Harry Potter back then, you'd never have made number 1.
Yeah, I think what you just illustrated there in that story is that this right place, right time is just about as much about paying attention to what time you're in as it is anything else. It's not sheer luck that boom, I just happen to be here and I'm the recipient of this universal luck that was just bestowed upon me by the universe. No, it's about you either putting yourself in the right place at the right time or recognizing what time and place you're in and taking advantage of that. And that's what it sounds to me like you've done. And I think other authors could do the same thing. What about the third key? So the third key to me is knowing the right people. People are very, very important to success. I can't think of a single story where a person did it 100% alone without any influence from any other person, negative or positive, either way. So for you, who were the people in your life that helped you succeed as an entrepreneur? And what would you think about the idea of people being a key to success?
Oh goodness, there's so many people. That's the interesting part, is that there isn't one person. My parents ran a motel. Like, I grew up in a motel. And so they were entrepreneurs themselves. And so I have funny stories about growing up in the motel, but I also knew the business I didn't want to run. I didn't want a brick and mortar business because they were tied to it. My dad put on a house coat at 2 a.m. to go down and rent a room to people that came off the highway and needed a room to rent at 2 a.m. That's not the life that I wanted. They provided a good life for our family with the motel, but it wasn't what I wanted. And so for them, I learned the good of entrepreneurial life, but also the things I didn't want. So for that, I'm very grateful, because, that I think put the entrepreneurial spirit in me, but also got me online. So I didn't have to answer the door at 2 a.m.
Yeah. Was there any person in your life that you could think back to who gave you the idea that you ought to write this down? You ought to do this book. You're pretty good at this. You've got great stories. Was there anybody who helped you do that?
My grade 3 teacher, actually, because I wrote all the time at that age, and she was very supportive, and she read everything I wrote and always wrote encouraging notes. And I know when my first book came out, even though I'm well removed from the small town in Alberta that I grew up in, she bought that book and she commented, and I don't think she wrote a review. I should write her and tell her that I need a review. But she was very supportive online. And so I think, that little seed that was planted as a little girl, I think she fostered it. Even though other people came along and squished it, the seed never went away. And for that, she definitely played a role.
I love it. I love it. I love it when teachers are that person, or at least involved in the story. Because I have teachers in my life that were very instrumental and helpful to me. And I was a school teacher for 4 years before I started my company.
Great.
And I love that teachers are part of that story. And I think we underestimate the role that teachers can play in the trajectory of a child's life. And so teachers can be negative or positive influences. And I'm very glad that you had your third grade teacher that helped encourage this in you, because now here we are on an internationally syndicated podcast talking about your story. So that's awesome. So thank you to her for the influence that she had on you. The last 2 keys, and I'll do these together and let you kind of talk about these and what your perception is, and whether you agree or disagree that they are keys to success. And that is preparation and plan. Preparation is the know-how to pull it off. So you're not likely to be successful. You're very unlikely to be successful if you don't know the thing that you are wanting to do. You don't know how to do it. So for example, you, with your real estate background, you couldn't have started a computer programming company necessarily. That wasn't, you weren't prepared for that. You would have had to have the know-how. And then on the plan side of things, it's the financial plan, the capital to execute whatever it is. And publishing and self-publishing has a lot to do with that. And I think that you'll have some interesting perspective on that. But you got passion, you've got being in the right place, the right time, you've got knowing the right people. And then the last two are preparation and plan, the know-how and the finances to pull it off. What do you think about those final two keys?
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, I have lots of thoughts, but helping people write a book, I can tell you the people who succeed are the ones that take the time to plan the book, because a lot of people are like me, like this is me, right? I got a book idea and write it. That's the typical entrepreneur is, fire and then figure it out later. But that time spent figuring out and getting clarity on your audience and the outcome of the outcome that you're offering that audience, that is gold. And that plan really sets your preparation, sets your book up for success. And then financially planning that, you're going to be working on this and investing in this book for probably a year to a year and a half before you get ROI, at least a direct ROI. A lot of people actually get ROI from just the whole process of getting clear and writing it. Now they're finding they're communicating clearer. People want to work with them more because their whole message is stronger as a result of the process. But actually selling books and getting consulting gigs and speaking, that doesn't happen for a year and a half later. So you got to financially plan for the investment, but also how much of a delay there is to get that return on the investment.
Well, if you were going to talk to someone who's listening to the show right now, who has this book idea, wants to write something, they haven't done anything yet, what would your advice be to that person?
Yeah, besides recommending my book, which I know sounds cheesy, but that's why I wrote it, is for people kind of going, I have an idea, what do I do with it? I wrote Self-Publish and Succeed for that. But what I always say kind of as questions to orient yourself is, understand what you're hoping is going to happen when your book comes out. So success, kind of defining that, because that will help guide what you need to write in your book. Because if you think you're going to get paid speaking engagements, you got to figure out who's in that audience and who's booking you and paying you to talk to that audience, so that you make sure this message is actually something that they're going to pay for. Because that is something a lot of people don't do. And then they wonder why their book didn't get them those paid speaking engagements. So figure out what you want the book to achieve. If it's a lead funnel, then that's a different, a slightly different angle. And then that knowing your audience, and your audience isn't a demographic, demographics are part of it, but it's knowing that problem that they need solving and what they've tried that hasn't worked before. I mean, kind of business 101, but figuring out who that person is and what they're going to be searching for when they're looking for your book. That's the first step. Like having that plan in place and understanding that will set you up for much better success.
I'm sure that there have been lots of people who've written books, self-published or published through traditional means, who've made zero money, that nothing happened. I'm sure that happens more frequently than you would care to admit, but I know that happens. But share with me one. You don't have to say the name of the book or the author, but just like one super successful story of a person who came through Book Launchers, who self-published a book and just made a buku of money. Like, this thing blew up better than we would have ever imagined. Do you have a story like that you could share to kind of close the show out today?
I don't have one about money necessarily, but I have one that I love because it's impact. And so he wrote, and it's Robert Bell, and he wrote a book on creativity. He's an accountant, and he wrote a book on creativity. So
you're lying to me.
No, it's true. It's a funny angle on a book. And through the whole process of doing the podcast and the whole process of getting clear on his message and all the way, he ended up earlier this year, he ended up getting a TED Global Ideas talk. And he's close to 2 million views on that talk. And he's so busy now with all the interesting opportunities that are coming his way. I don't ask money, but I am certain he's doing phenomenally well and also loving life, right? Because he's sharing this cool message of how you can have creativity in any career and how to foster your creativity and the benefits in any career. It's pretty cool. So I love that story. I'm so excited for him.
So tell his name again.
Robert Bell.
How do you spell the last name?
Belle.
Dell, like computers, but
no,
not.
Bell, like a bell, like ringing your bell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Robert
Ring the bell.
Well, I think we should go look that up on YouTube, because let's encourage people to add to that 2 million views, because that Isn't that what we want? Because going back to your definition of success, it's about impact. Freedom, for sure. We want that because that's personal and what we need. But I think we get that freedom. That freedom is granted to us by the larger the impact that we make. And so this guy who's an accountant who writes a book on creativity of all things, I think that that's an amazing story. I'm glad you told that story because I think it's a good encouragement for people who are listening to the show to say, listen, whatever you've got, what's that know-how? What's that preparation in your brain? What do you have up there that you could take to the world through book launchers or any other means and share with the world to make an impact? And who knows, that might turn into money, might turn into something different, but I think that's interesting. I'll have one final observation I want to get your opinion on, because I've got an opinion on this, and I'm gonna guess, I'm gonna seed this, but I think you'll probably disagree with me, but I'll let you agree or disagree. Go back a decade or two or three, if you were a published author, and I use the word published lightly because the way you do it or the way anybody else, if you've got a physical printed book that's published and out there for people to consume, you get viewed in a specific and different light than someone who doesn't. I think that's a given, right? I think you don't agree on that. I think today that is still true. However, I think that something new is podcasting. I think podcasting is not replacing book authorship, but I think, in my opinion, and you feel free to disagree with me, but I think that having a podcast like this has been able to put me in the same light that I think maybe you got put in when you first published your book. Now, the difference is there's no Amazon bestseller or best download, on podcasts like you do for books, but do you think that podcasting today, again, not replacing book authorship, but is it growing to that same level of validation, validating you as an expert? What do you think about podcasting versus book publishing today?
I think podcasting has tremendous benefits. Your audience is all over the world. I don't think it's quite at book level yet, though, because if you look at speaking applications, you want to speak, it says, what books have you written? It doesn't say, what podcasts do you run? If you're on TV and you have a podcast and you have a book, they're going to say author of, right? It still is that expert status that I think in a lot of circles, it has the same credibility. It gives you a better network than authoring, like, frankly. But I think as far as mainstream media and speaking and those kind of pieces, being an author is still superior to podcasting for now, but it certainly is shifting.
Well, I appreciate you being on the show today and sharing with us your background as a real estate mogul in Canada, and now starting book launchers and helping over 135 authors do 300 plus books. And congratulations on your success on the books that you've written. And I encourage people to look you up and get connected with you. How would they do that?
Yeah, the best thing is to go to booklaunchers.com /7, the number 7 steps, and that will get you a worksheet to get you started. It'll help you figure out a lot of those questions I was talking about earlier. And then that gets you my email address too. So you can just hit, after you get that download, you'll get that from my email, just hit reply and ask me any questions and I'll answer them. That's
beautiful. So it's booklaunchers.com /7, as in the number 7, right?
Yep.
Just the actual number, not the letters, but the number 7.
Mm-hmm.
So booklaunchers.com /7. So Julie Broad, thank you so much for coming on The Root of All Success today. This has been a pleasure for me. I don't know if anybody else enjoyed it, but I really did, because I'm very interested in getting a book out there. And of course, I think this has been a very interesting show. And I think that anybody out there who's thinking about writing a book or being an expert in their area, they need to reach out to you, booklaunchers.com /7. So Julie, been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, there you have it. Yet another amazingly successful entrepreneur who shared her story about how she went from real estate success to publishing and author success, and to now helping literally hundreds of authors achieve success through her company, Book Launchers. And I want to remind you to go to booklaunchers.com /7, as in the number 7, for her free report and to get connected with her. Maybe you have a book that you want to write. Maybe there's something bubbling up in your brain like yours in mine, and you want to write a book. I'm definitely going to stay in touch with Julie, because I think that what she's doing is phenomenal. She's not only doing it, she's doing it in a highly successful way. As she described in the show, her definition of success is freedom and impact. And by writing a book, you could make a great impact on this world and achieve the freedom that you truly want to achieve. Now, one of the things that I do as part of my way to coach people is, of course, I do private one-on-one coaching. I do group coaching, et cetera. But I want to invite you to become a member of the Successful Entrepreneur online learning community. It's only $55 a month. And in exchange for that $55 a month, I want you to listen to the type of value you get. So don't click stop yet. Just listen, because I got a special offer for you. What you're going to get is you're going to get 3 to 4 live trainings with me where I coach live on screen on Zoom on Tuesdays. And I do a Q&A session once a month. I do 2 success lectures twice a month where I talk about I go deep on subjects like time management, money management, how to start your business, how to write operating agreements, all the things that you need to know as an entrepreneur. And then I also bring in an entrepreneur expert in some area once a month, and I do Entrepreneur Master Series. And I bring in experts to talk about his or her expertise, and we get very tactical on that Zoom call. And as a member of the community, you get access to all that. Not only do you get access to that live, you get access to the library of all the past teachings that I've done, all the coaching, all the training right there in the portal inside my system. So go to therealjasonduncan.com/TSE for a free 30-day trial. Go there, therealjasonduncan.com/TSE. That stands for the Successful Entrepreneur. Now, what you also get with your membership is not only access to those live trainings every single week. I do one almost every single week. You also get 20% off any online course you ever want to buy through Results University, and 10% off any coaching program that you want to sign up for. We do live events all across the country from time to time, and you will get access to those, invited to those. It's a great way, and it's a low-cost investment to increase your acumen as an entrepreneur. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing. And I want to thank, again, Julie Broad for being my guest on the show today. I'm the real Jason Duncan. Tune in again next week on The Root of All Success when we talk with yet another amazingly successful entrepreneur about his or her journey to success. Until then, remember, Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we invite you to visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Take charge of your business. Grow it from great to incredible. Join us again next time here on The Root of All Success.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.